counsel can advise you as to, you know, setting up a Delaware C Corp, what needs to be done, and then setting up the capital structure with respect to the common stock.
I
So
think there's a range of normalcy here, and you just want to be within that range of normalcy.
Oh, that's a
You know,
great
there's a range, and so that when investors, bankers, or others look at you, they'll say, hey, these people know what they're doing.
actually, that is a great point, and when we overlay that, it's got to be in a normal range, because that is the biggest red flag ever. We were talking about a red flag where, like, you know, let's say, Fred, you've got a startup, and I'm like, dude, I'll introduce you to these guys that will give you money, but you got to pay me. I need, like, stock and cash, dude, right? So what's that going to cause, right? Because there's some things that you don't want to do, and that might be one. You guys chat about that one just real quickly, because I think we see a fair amount of people that don't use the network properly, and they're always putting up a toll. So like, oh, I know guys with money, this Chinese guy, and it's like, I gotta pay him. I'm like, what, huh?
Yeah, no, unlike DC, which is a pay-to-play town, it doesn't work that way here. So if somebody said that they wanted, you know, money or other compensation for an introduction, that would be a major red flag to turn and run the other direction as quickly as possible. That's just, I don't know, that's just not really done. And I don't know if you have anything more to add on that.
Yeah, so, no. I mean, that is an absolute red. That is somebody who clearly indicates that he or she is not part of the ecosystem in the Valley, and any introduction you give that person is exactly the kind of person you'd never want to talk to. So this is really a part of sort of, you give what you have and you take what you need kind of town. So, you know, our second round of investors are people who were just there for us for a year, made introductions, talked to us, got to know our business, so that when we went for another round of funding, they literally just came to us and said, we'd love to invest. And that's the kind of relationships that you foster over time that you want in your team. We've seen, you know, we used to be a marketplace for attorneys, and we've seen lawyers who said, I can help you, but I need 2% equity, and I'm charging $450 an hour, and in this town you will find, especially great lawyer, the better the lawyer, the more likely they are to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes with you, just to like talk about stuff. And there are plenty of meetups like this where you can bend somebody's ear for 15 minutes to just get a quick question and slowly build that relationship. And that's what it is. It's a relationship. There's somebody who's going to, you know, I'm an attorney and I have an attorney, right? Because I want somebody who actually is more familiar with the startup space than I am. And if a lawyer, you know, speaking about law, if a lawyer says, you know, well, you need to hire the firm, and then I need a $5,000 retainer, and that's not a guy who's going to be on your team. And
Awesome. All right. Hey, we had oh yeah, in the back.
Yeah, with all due respect, I was a VC 20 years ago, and even today I'm seeing where Wilson Sensei and all these other guys, they want equity, or they're not going to really jump through a lot of hoops for you. So from my experience, you know, that's not the case. The really good lawyers have gotten to that position because they want to charge for that level. And I have one other question, which is...
Well, hold on. Let me just say, so you're saying that good attorneys want equity? I mean, they charge and make...
Yeah, because they built themselves up to a certain level.
Yeah, they can, but I think the options are available where you don't have to give your attorney equity.
Well, there's
probably instances where they do, but I would say, I don't know, talking to the panel.
There's two kind of worlds. There's the world of I'm a single person or a couple of co-founders looking to kind of get things started. Then it's probably like Yael mentioned, it's like much more of a kind of collaborative thing. When you're talking about getting an attorney before your fundraise and you're going to talk to one of the big firms, like it's expected. I mean, of course, they're going to come in for some sort of, you know, compensation or equity. Like you're not going to go through a Series A without having that in place, probably.
equity is still rare. It really is.
I mean, I'm just saying.
It can happen. It can happen.
It can happen.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You had a second question, real quick?
I was just going to ask you, what's the current thinking on which states to incorporate in? Because 20 years ago, you incorporated in California because California was investor friendly. You didn't incorporate in Nevada because investors wouldn't come to you if you did.
Yep.
Where is it going today? Because the states are starting to raise their fees.
Yeah, a good question. So
you don't want to invest,
yeah.
you want to incorporate in 5 states.
So let's go through this one quickly. Which state to incorporate? I mean, most Delaware is C Corp, right?
Yeah, there's really no reason not to incorporate in Delaware. I mean, I probably would. I mean, there's certain states that you wouldn't want to be in, but there would be no reason why you would not do Delaware unless you had some tax issue, depending on the residency of the founders. I mean,
You still have to qualify to do business in California?
it's a,
Qualify to do business in California, pay the fees here?
well, you still have to pay, wherever you're doing business, you have to pay those fees, but the state of incorporation, I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't do Delaware. I mean, Delaware is just totally standard.
Hey, do we have any convertible no questions? Any? Yeah, was there a convertible no question?
We're not. He said there's a few states who would not.
Well, I think the short answer though, because we want to move on to another one,
All right,
is
move on.
go to Delaware, right? Go to what, everybody with that? Go to Delaware.
Go to Delaware.
Yeah,
like
Go to Delaware.
I still do California corporations, so I don't think you're out of the range of normalcy again if you do that, but as you go through rounds of venture capital, eventually your venture capitalists are gonna want you to reincorporate in Delaware.
Okay. I think Delaware wins in the tie.
I mean, just to point on that, just looking at it from a litigation perspective, knowing that if you incorporate in a state, you're gonna be subject to jurisdiction there, and so if you're in the business of IP or you're being threatened with IP litigation, having your corporate state in Delaware will subject you to litigation in a plaintiff-friendly venue such as Delaware too.
Got it. Did somebody else have a question? No? We're good? We're good? You guys, what did we not cover that we wanted to, that we talked about that was super fun and exciting for these guys? Crazy exciting. Horror stories. Huh? Right?
That's
Who's
the
got
only one with-
Pam, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have a good horror story for us? Something IP related maybe? Horrific?
I've
Bloody,
got lit-
nobody died?
I'm a litigator, so I have really good. Actually, when we're talking about the founder, that issue, I mean, I'm not one that knows about all the corporate, necessities and what you need to do to incorporate, but I'm the one that when the thing went down, to hell in a handbasket, the clients come to me. And I had this one, speaking of war stories, really ugly situation down in San Mateo Superior Court, where you had founders that made it very unclear in their agreement who had the rights to certain shares, how things would happen if someone down the road wasn't performing at a level, that they were all anticipating at the beginning. And this group of founders has been torn apart by this very horrible litigation where one party ended up having a lot more money so they could fund it and the other two didn't. So I would say you really need to be crystal clear as you can be in that agreement, what the various responsibilities are, and don't just think about where you are at that particular time. You need to be thinking about what could happen, a year down the road. And then the other thing that I would say generally is that, and this is a point that Imran raised, you really need to be thinking about where in these various agreements that you'll sign, and most of the times you may not even look carefully at the agreement, where are you going to be held into court if things go to hell in a handbasket? And, you really don't want to be litigating in, perhaps Delaware. At least the judges are really good there. If you get pulled into Florida, where I've had clients that have been pulled into, that has been a nightmare for them, and they've been completely hometown. So I would say, when you enter into these agreements, make sure that you're very careful with exactly who needs to perform at what level, who gets what, and also look at the venue clauses, and look at, your choice of law clauses, because you don't want to spend a lot of time and money litigating those issues. It can be a real nightmare for you.
Good advice. Is there any advantage with respect to software licensing agreements, have the jurisdiction California?
Can I just quickly speak on relation
Yeah,
housing?
quickly.
I think that it's if you have to, with all respect to sort of all of us, except one being members of the bar, if you have to take it to your lawyers, that is bad. You don't want to be there. You really want to, it goes back to this point of communication. You really want to choose a person with whom you can talk about anything, and not just the way things are today, but the way things might be tomorrow, things that might change. If you're going to be part of a company for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, your lives personally might change significantly in that time. Your roles in the company might change significantly. And if you can't work that out amongst yourselves 90% of the way, and you have to go to a lawyer to fix that, that's not a place you want to be. So the best decision you can make is the person with whom, you know, is find a company with somebody who you really can talk to.
I just had one comment, partial horror story. If you want to hear the rest of it, you can meet me for a beer after. But I've been through a pretty high-profile bankruptcy, first a Chapter 11, then a Chapter 7, and so a lot of the discussion just, you know, seems and sounds very ominous. And one thing that I kind of, and a lot of my coworkers, you know, came out of this whole experience with was this feeling that, like, the worst that could have possibly happened, and everything's okay, and everything, you know, everybody got jobs after, and people continued on, life went on. It was like very traumatic going through it, but everything worked out. So just a positive note there. It's easy to think that all the repercussions from all these things you're either going to do legally or not do are going to be terrible, and it's probably not that terrible.
Well, I would only take issue with there when, I mean, having been sued personally, being the subject of litigation, even if you're absolutely correct, is a really horrible experience. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, like, you wake up in the middle of the night if you can get to sleep at all. I mean, it's really a taxing experience. And so, I mean, we're kind of joking about it, but that's why a lot of these, I mean, all these formation agreements, that's why it's right to, like, build your foundation correctly. And so, and try to anticipate, you know, again, you can't always anticipate every possible, you know, doomsday scenario, but if you get the fundamentals right, you can avoid a lot of this stuff. And so that's why I think the kind of the overarching theme that I'd like to deliver.
Yeah, and just one more thing on that. I mean, none of us like to dwell on the negative, and in the excitement of having this great invention or starting this wonderful company, we're just gangbusters, you know, moving forward and doing what we can to get to that positive goal. But if you're going to invest in any money in a lawyer, okay, this is a really good place to really think through, you know, what these various documents, from the founding documents to, you know, documents with your customers, contracts, you know, that type of thing, what they're going to say. Because the small print really does matter. It really does. And this is not just something that you should, you know, slough off as not part of what your vision is. You need, the devil's in the details. And if you're going to invest, get some good advice. Talk through with your lawyer, you know, issues that you may see coming up down the pike, and draw those clauses up in a way that's really favorable to you. I mean, you should all have your own stock contracts, your own form contracts that you use for your vendors, customers, other companies that you work with. And those are the contracts you should be proposing. And you want to be working off your contract, which of course is slanted to be the most favorable to you, and not something that's like 25 million pages long, but something that they'll look at and they'll accept and they'll sign, because you're hoping that they actually are not going to pay attention to the details. And then you'll end up being in a better position. So be careful with that. It really does matter.
Good advice. We got time for about one or two questions. So again, remember, free law advice. Going.
Which isn't legal advice.
Yeah, no, it's just hypothetical. By the way, we'll get one last thing. So I was deposed once for a litigation matter, and I'm looking at Pam here for a minute, and they had to teach me, because if you ask me what time is it, I'd go, yeah, 7:30. The answer would be, yes, I know what time it is. Right? It's so weird. Hopefully you guys will never get to that. So we have two questions over here.
The best answer is, I
Yeah.
don't recall.
I don't recall. It's like in Wolf of Wall Street. If you guys seen that lately, it's a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I work with food startups and food tech startups,
Yeah.
and that space, particularly in San Francisco, is very collaborative, and you know, it seems like everybody's helping. Is there any legal pitfalls? I mean, it seems like I'm always promoting, but at the same time, you might be like opening yourself up for maybe some legal issues.
That's the guy with the stealth startup.
Right,
Well,
that's a
wait,
good
wait,
example.
wait,
How do you
wait.
promote yourself and
But when you're collaborating, I mean, are you collaborating like that's a great guy, they have fresh eggs, and this guy's got new tech. So what do you? I guess I need to understand kind of what are you fearful that you might be crossing the line on?
Well,
Just helping that way?
Well, trade secrets might be a thing. Maybe you've got some like, the new, recipe for Coke or whatever. I mean, there's I don't know what you're talking about in terms of how the collaboration.
Dude, this thing cures cancer. Like, if you say something like that, you're probably going to set yourself up for some potential trouble. There was a Kickstarter thing on there that supposedly you could like wave it over food and it's going to tell you what calories. It's like, come on, right? So
I
mean,
I think the advice here is like what my grandmother used to say, which is before you say something, it belongs to you, and after you say it, it belongs to the world. So if there's not something you don't want the world to know, don't say it.
Yeah, that's good. Right. Brian, did you have something?
I'm like,
No, it's
The
true.
whole world,
I like.
don't say it.
See, grandmas are smart, right? We
Mine
never
are
knew that,
ridiculous.
right? Grandmas are smart. Yeah.
So yeah, so Pam, so you said the devil's in the detail. So like, I'm a founder of a company, and I have so much I'm already doing with trying to build a product and get customers and marketing and sales, and so I don't really have a lot of time to spend with doing terms of service and agreements and things like that. So, but I also don't have a lot of capital because I'm on bootstrap so far. So how do you sort of balance this, right? Like, of course these things are important, these documents are important. I'm signing a few a week now, and I don't have time. I just don't have time to deal with this. So it's like, how do you balance that? Like, and I want to get a lawyer, but yet I can't afford the rates yet, so.
Then maybe find a lawyer that is hungry and that is able to work with you. And that will cut you some slack in the short term, and because they're excited about the long-term relationship.
that's right.
And it doesn't mean necessarily that actually is a lawyer at a solo proprietorship. I mean, that could be a larger law firm. It could be our law firm, okay? It depends on what your technology is. So don't underestimate your potential ability to be able to get a competent lawyer, especially in this market post-2008, that might be willing to sit down with you. And as we were talking about earlier, and I totally agree, if someone's not going to sit down with you and talk to you for 15 or 20 minutes about something generally, they're probably not that great of a lawyer anyway.
Yeah.
And, you can get some free advice. But on the other hand, having been the lawyer that actually has spent a lot of time giving out, advice and guidance in the hopes of long-term relationships, that is something that I think that if somebody sits down and they are good with you, they give you good advice, you should probably reward them when, you actually can start paying a lot more money. So I would just say, think of that too.
And in addition to things like this, I mean, we do, our firm does a thing with, it's a different industry segment, but it's mobile health. We do an office hours thing at the Mobile Health Conference in DC every December, where companies startups who are attending that conference can apply to meet with us. We do some issue spotting, sit down with them for an hour, and there's programs like that all over the place where you can get actually like real legal advice, not just somebody kind of spitballing with you, over a beer, but actually like looking at your documents, making some recommendations, and then kind of getting you pointed in the right direction. And another thing that a lot of firms do, and we entertain these arrangements as well, is again deferred compensation, where we'll give you X thousand dollars of time, and at some funding event, or if you get funded, then then you pay us. Otherwise, we're just kind of taking the risk and maybe going to be writing that off.
Yeah.
So there's things like that you can do.
So I think I was just going to say one thing, and you can talk. Don't worry. We're going to get to you. We're going to get to you. Is that lawyers qualify companies just as much as VCs do, in the sense, especially if you're going to defer fees. Because if they believe in it, right, if they believe in it and maybe somebody doesn't know, and they took the extra time, like you said, to listen and understand, which sometimes you don't get in a quick 20-minute pitch, they'll defer potentially a lot because they're backing it. They're putting their name on it with a partnership, and they've had some successes before in doing that. So it doesn't always happen, but there's could be good things about that. So sorry, Yael.
I know exactly where you are. I think sometimes lawyers don't understand how little time you have to think about what they obsess over, what we as lawyers obsess over. So when I became the client, I didn't have 2 minutes to talk to my lawyer because I had to do everything, half of which I'd never even done before, right? It's really overwhelming. That being said, you don't want to mess this up because you have time to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. And if Arent Fox is offering you some free legal time, I would take it. But really, you want to start to build that relationship. And a thing about deferred fees, be really careful about deferred fees. Deferred fees can end up being a very usurious line of credit, right? You wouldn't borrow $1,000 from a bank and pay them $18,000 6 months from now, right? And so just because they defer doesn't mean they can't fix that fee. So you're the client, and believe me, lawyers are hungry for work. So when you can, and I completely agree that when you are the next Facebook and that lawyer has invested in you, don't let your VC bully you and force you to go to another lawyer, because that person's been with you and has shown it to your company and they deserve to be rewarded. But when you're you right now, don't be afraid to say, I need you to do this for $1,000 and I need to pay you 6 months from now.
But don't be afraid to invest the time, because to your point, the hours you'll spend being deposed or
Yeah.
suing someone or whatever pale in comparison to the hour you might have to spend reading that contract or reading that letter or whatever.
Awesome, okay. One last question. All right, second last question, Ryan's got one too.
Well, I have two questions.
Oh, make it quick. It's okay.
It's actually, you mentioned before something, if they could talk about licensing software.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see where that conversation was going.
Is it, I was wondering if there's a preferred state, is California advantageous with respect to most software licensing agreements in Silicon Valley are
And
obviously
then-
jurisdiction of
and then
California?
My second question has to do with NDAs.
Oh.
I work with a software company, well, a startup, and we're talking to the corporations now. We're signing NDAs, but we're not sure how much can we actually talk about, because if you really read them carefully, I mean, English is, first of all, not my first language, so I started reading them, and then I'm kind of lost in the words, and I'm not sure if it's actually protecting what I potentially may say. So how much can I say? Are NDAs really different from each other, or I mean, like how?
You're signing their NDA or they're signing yours?
I'm signing theirs.
They're bigger than you, right?
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh,
And so you want to know what kind of the bounds of the NDA are in terms of what you can say to him.
right. Well, the thing is, like, yeah, I brought it, but no, just kidding. So it's actually quite
Broad.
they're quite broad, and
Complicated,
you
broad.
know, like you can be it can work both sides. Like it's that big.
I think rather than kind of getting caught up in that kind of games or thinking about like that game, I think you have to think about really about the materiality of whatever disclosure you might be making, that you are questioning whether or not it falls within the NDA, right? So I mean, even though you're signing a very broad NDA that prohibits you from, you know, even mentioning the company's name in your sleep, you know, I mean, what is the materiality of, what are you actually worried about, I guess? And you know what I mean? Like, what are you thinking you might be doing or saying that might potentially violate the NDA? And then just, it's like any other kind of common sense.
Oh no. So I have an algorithm, and I don't want to say. I mean, how much do I say until they can actually steal it from me, and I'm not protected? Does that make sense?
I'm actually dealing with a situation like that right now, and I guess, can everyone hear me? I don't think I need the microphone, but what I would say about that is that if you're worried about any sort of proprietary disclosure, file a patent application or get some sort of intellectual property protection, because despite having that NDA in place, that's going to become an issue of fact or a dispute later on as to who said what or whose idea it was.
And that's why I was asking the first question, because we do have a patent, but it's pending, so.
Well, that's fine, but what the patent gives you is at least you put your stake in the ground, you said this is my idea, and should that patent issue in the future and somebody rips off your idea, meanwhile, you'll be able to assert that patent against them.
Hey, on NDAs, I'm an advisor to a company called Easy NDA. Go to their website, because what they're trying to do is to establish a standard NDA, a mutual NDA, that has been blessed by a number of lawyers, so that people then could use it without going through the expense or the delays of what you're going through.
Yeah, I
So to
promise
speak.
you, if that company's big enough, they're not, they had a lawyer
work on their NDA,
I
they're
actually, I
50
help
grand
them,
in.
yeah. But again, it's, their purpose is to create a standard NDA so people don't have to go through all this crap with NDAs to get an opportunity. And I think they're doing a good job. Check it out and make your own judgment.
Look at that
Ross will do
choice of
NDAs
law
too.
provision in that NDA, though, again, not to harp on this too much, but you really would like, I think, to at least, well, with the venue provision, if there's any dispute, you don't want to be dragged across country. And so, you know, I would recommend that you have California as the state where any disputes is resolved, and preferably in your county, so that you're not flying down to Southern California. And that is something that, you know, if you have to kind of dig in your heels, it makes sense to do so.
Yeah, I think with respect to your question about big company, like you're breeding outside your species. And that's what all startups do, but big companies have different time frames, ambitions. If you're not funded, many of them try and take advantage of you. I mean, there's no secret about it, and it can be, so I think the IP and the patent filing is smart. The question is, what do you want out of it? Are you want funding from them? You want them to buy you? I mean, so you've got to ask yourself that. But I think in addition to having good legal advice, there's some strategic business decisions that you need to be wary about. There's great opportunities that happen working with big companies. Sometimes they can be fossil-like slow, but they're amazing. So, you know, hopefully you have some good business advisors too, and good legal advisors. I think it's a combination. I mean, you can set yourself up for some really awkward issues. So it would keep all you guys busy though, right? Oh, so.
Non-compete.
Okay, oh, non-compete. Mara had a question. Non-compete, which is?
My new startup called Pied Piper.
Pied Piper. So are non-competes legal here in different states? What's the big kind of?
California, they're generally frowned upon.
Yep.
So, non-competes. Most other states, some states have statutory tests as to what's an acceptable length of time that you can be locked up with a non-compete. I just did one actually in Minnesota where they were trying to lock a person up for 3 years, and under Minnesota law you can't do that. So non-competes are generally, in most other places, allowed, but as long as the time and the location, like within 200 miles within North America would be too big. So I mean, just make sure that it's reasonable in most other places.
Non-competes in California are enforceable in the case of an acquisition. So if your company gets bought, which is a good deal, you're going to probably get forced, if you're not working for them, you're going to get forced to sign a non-compete. And those are enforceable in California.
Is that part of the acquisition? I mean,
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
part of the golden handcuffs?
Yes, exactly. That's the quid pro quo that is fair in that circumstance.